Hello and welcome to another edition of Y-PAC Check-ins. I'm your host, Sean Davido, and today I'm joined by Jennifer Ferrer-Santa Ines, and she's the City of Yakima's Finance Director. Thank you for joining me today, Jennifer.
Hello, Sean. How are you?
I'm good. We want to talk to you today about budget, but first we want to get to know just a little bit about you. You've been with the city for about a year. Give us a little bit about you and your background.
Sure, not a problem. I've worked with many municipalities, both large and small. So primarily on the west side, but these skills are easily transferable. I do consider myself as an individual raised by primarily 3 cities, but I enjoy having learned about the communities that I've worked for, the challenges that they are facing, and working together and accomplishing results. My background is primarily municipalities, but I have worked for a water district as well.
So public service is in your background and in your history.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I want to talk about and give you some congratulations. You were recently awarded a significant award of excellence from the Government Finance Officers Association. Can you tell me just a little bit about that award and what that award means?
Of course, it's always exciting to receive an award, right? I'm especially proud of this accomplishment as it is truly a group effort. I do want to give a shout out to my finance department for the countless meetings with various departments so that we can get the input that we need from everyone in the organization to produce this award-winning document. And I should share with you that in order to earn this recognition, a budget document must demonstrate transparency in budgeting and excel as a policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, and communications tool. So in a nutshell, staff produces a budget book that is understandable. It serves as a guide on how the city will serve its community. It outlines the resources that we have. And we have performance measures to help us stay on track.
I am no budget expert. I know a little bit about city budget, but I want you to explain just some of the basic budget stuff for us about city budgets and city finances. Can you give us any information like what's the largest expense? What's the average city budget? What do we look at when you guys look at a budget?
Yeah, and instead of the 6 months overview, I'll just give you the 2-minute version.
Yes, please.
So the City of Yakima has an annual budget of $294 million. And the city's general fund provides a full range of municipal services like public safety and parks and streets, courts, economic development, and of course, all of the administrative support departments that allow for all of those services to be provided to our community. The greatest portion of our revenue sources come from sales tax. We all know what that is.
Right.
Utility and franchise taxes, those are all like cable, utility tax, cell phones, all those things. And of course, property taxes, which, is just part of your mortgage payment.
Right.
Our largest expenditures probably is not a surprise. It is on salaries and benefits and the professional services that we sometimes have to go outside of the city for. Of course, the city also has enterprise funds, including water, sewer, irrigation, transit, convention center, the airport. And those services are like a business. And so they are funded by user fees and charges.
The general fund is our police, our fire, our parks, our roads, things like that.
It's
general services.
It's what the community primarily sees on a daily basis.
Right. Now the city is required to have a balanced budget. And one of the reasons I brought you in is we have changed the process a little bit. We are going to a 2-year process as opposed to going through the budget process every year. Can you explain why we're doing that and why this is a good idea, advantages, maybe disadvantages? What pushed us to this direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So the advantages of producing a 2-year budget is multifold. I alluded to something on an earlier question, and I should share with you that producing the city's budget is at least 6 months, if not longer. And so usually once council adopts the budget, it's not before long before we're starting to develop and talk about the next year's budget. And so naturally, having to produce a budget every year takes up a lot of time, not just finance, but also the other departments. So producing a 2-year budget it allows for other priorities to be reviewed and looked at or have conversations on. These are things like developing a forecast beyond just next year, reviewing our fees, our charges, and the services that we seek out or that we provide to our community. It's also working on developing new programs for our parks, our recreation, and just having the time to engage with our community and helping plan the future.
Absolutely. And we are not the only group that does this. The state of Washington works on a biennium 2-year budget cycle, correct? Are there other municipalities that do this process?
Of course, cities of all sizes. So for example, I worked for the smallest community I worked for is Normandy Park. It's a community of 6,700. They produce a 2-year budget. Our neighboring city of Pasco at 75,000 in population, they're doing a 2-year budget. And larger cities like the city of Tacoma, 219,000 in population, also produces a 2-year budget.
So it's not uncommon. It's actually maybe a trend forward, and more communities are starting to do this like Yakima, right?
I think so. So I've only produced a 2-year budget until joining the city of Yakima. So you can see my surprise.
Yes. So this is kind of old hat for you. And so this is a process that you think is successful and will help our city in the future, right?
I think so, because as I mentioned, we adopt a budget and then we take a break or two, a month break or two, and we're talking about next year's budget again. So it feels like we're always working in the budget, in the finance department. So this will allow for a more strategic approach of talking about other priorities.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about one of the concerns when changes come to the budget, unforeseen things like gas prices that have risen through the roof. How does that affect, if you can't change things year to year, how does that affect that process?
Okay, so with an annual budget, the city does amend or modify its budget based on new information, right? So
Right.
You have to remember it was 6 or 7 months ago before we may get different information.
Right.
So the revised Code of Washington does allow for budget modifications called an amendment, and we would still have this opportunity with a 2-year budget. So we can amend it at least once a year. If we need to amend it more than that, we can do so. In an annual budget process, usually we've modified the budget at least 2 times, usually every quarter or so.
Wonderful.
As new information arrives.
And that covers things that you don't expect, right? Like the rising fuel costs. If we have a snowstorm, it helps to cover things like that. So you can make adjustments to the budget, which I've always been told is kind of a guess. You guys are just kind of, you're forecasting, you're guessing
exactly
what the revenues will be.
Yeah, so we produced a budget at the time that it is produced and presented to council, given the most recent and accurate information that is available at that time. So, everything has to be considered with the ebbs and flows that may come. And so another good example is when we go out for bid for large construction projects, right? You never know what you're gonna get. You have an engineer's estimate from 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, and you don't go out for bid until, later, right?
Yeah.
And so it is an educated and best guess based on scenarios and available information. You are right.
And ultimately, we have to be balanced by the end of each year. That's just state requirement, correct?
Right. And the budget really is a guide so that you know what your limitations are, because resources are limited and we don't have just any and all available resources out there.
Right. And let's talk a little bit about the shape the city is in now. where is the city at right now? What are the indicators that will show what direction we're going? What should people look for?
Yeah, well, the city is working with its available resources that it has, right? However, the needed services for the Yakima community is not enough. So a difficult decision that sometimes present itself is choosing between public safety services and ensuring that there is equipment available to provide those public safety services. So both are needed, but if you don't have enough for both, which is more important?
Right.
So council is presented a budget to adopt every year, right? Or in this case, moving forward, it'll be every other year. But it incorporates the council's priorities and the services that will be provided to the community. And, revenue, for example, this year, revenue projections will not be sufficient to deliver all of the city that it has planned for.
Right.
One factor of that is inflation. The cost of service delivery without new and or alternative revenues to the city just cannot be sustained long-term, right? Because we've got property tax that are growing by that 1% cap. We've got sales tax, which is a little bit more volatile, yet all of the expenditures are growing by so much more than those growth rates on revenues. So that is a concern. And this is why we ensure that there's transparency in the city's finances. The council receives a quarterly report on the city's financial standings.
We've covered a lot of stuff. We've talked for just a few minutes. We've covered a lot of information that people really need to know and need to be informed about. But I want to give you the opportunity. What else? What have I not covered? What have I not asked you that you would like to get out to the residents of Yakima about finance and the city budget, or anything that you would like to give information to our residents about?
Yeah, and of course, I'm very passionate about making sure that the city is in a financially sustainable position. And I'm going to be working hard at making sure that the city is not just planning for today or tomorrow, but we should also be spending some time and strategizing about our future growth and becoming more sustainable, right? This includes annually reviewing our fees and charges, assessing whether the city is receiving value for the external services that we use, investing in infrastructure, the facilities maintenance, personnel, and ensuring there's a replacement program for the city's fleet and equipment, and maintaining sufficient reserves, right? Which council has demonstrated that maybe where we're at today is not sufficient long-term. And of course, adopting solid financial policies and incorporating best practices. So that's where my time will be focused.
Wonderful. And it sounds like you have a good grasp on this. I've watched your presentations. I think the city is on the right track. And I thank you for everything you do and have done in the last year for the city of Yakima. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate the opportunity.
I do want to make sure that we tell everybody, if they are looking for information for the city of Yakima, they can find the information at www.yakimawa.gov. And there is a finance page. I'm guessing people can go and find more information about finance on the city's website. Is there other places that they could find information on the budget and finance?
Yeah, so there's always a state auditor's office, which holds the annual financial report for the city of Yakima, as well as any other municipalities that you might be interested in. And I'm always available for an email, a phone call, if you're ever interested in sitting down and taking a deep dive into the city's finances.
Even not so deep of a dive, maybe just to understand some of the basic stuff. And I sincerely appreciate you going through that with me. I know the basics, but it's always nice to hear it from the experts like you. So
thank you, Sean.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us today.